Hello and welcome in. It's always college football. I'm your host, Greg McElroy. You guys know Sundays are all about instant reaction to what went down yesterday. If you notice the voice, I'm struggling a little bit today, not going to lie. Can't really speak. This is very typical in November when going to and from Bristol, working 7 days a week. It's super fun. I love this time of year. But I feel like mid-November, I always end up with something. Like something. My voice is either shot or I get sick or whatever. But we're going to power through today. Just don't judge the voice, all right? We're going to be all right. Let's start at the top with the College Football Playoff Committee rankings with the Oregon Ducks. They go on the road to Wisconsin and deliver in the fourth quarter in what was, I thought, a remarkably entertaining football game. I thought NBC did a great job covering it. Just everything about the game felt massive. It was just super entertaining. So that, from an entertainment standpoint, really, really good. And I know people will say, well, it wasn't high scoring. It was 16-13. Wisconsin had 230 yards of offense. I understand all of that, and I just don't care. I found that to be compelling television. And I actually think that is going to be beneficial. That performance on the road is going to be beneficial long-term for where Oregon wants to go. They did not have their best stuff. They did not play great on the offensive side of the football. I thought all in all, Wisconsin in many ways did a lot of things to show, all right, hang on, this is how you attack Oregon. This is what you need to do to go after Oregon's offense. And I thought Wisconsin executed at a pretty high level on the defensive side. But Dylan Gabriel and this offense composed, felt like they never at any point flinched, felt like they were going to be able to get the ball going again. They never really lost faith, never really lost hope. They stayed committed to what it was that they were doing with some quick passes and things like that. But I do think this is something that Oregon will look back on and say, all right, if teams are denying the deep ball like Wisconsin is, can we be more methodical? Can we do this? Can we do that? The answer is yes. It was not pretty, but it was very effective, and they did enough to get the win. Credit to Wisconsin. Great performance. Probably the best we've seen them look in the Luke Fickell era against top-level competition. Top-level competition. They had the ball in their racket, and while they left something to be desired offensively, I didn't think they played very well on that side of the ball. The commitment to the run game was encouraging, and I think if they can just get something out of the passing game down the road, they're going to be in a really good spot. I look next at number 2, Ohio State. Slow start, not super surprising. Northwestern playing for their bowl lives, massive game for them to have the Buckeyes in their house. Uncomfortable setting in Wrigley Field, but it never really mattered once the first quarter came to a close, and we haven't really – I wasn't at any point. Were you guys concerned about Ohio State winning the football game? The way Ohio State is playing on defense right now, it's going to be really hard to beat that football team. And I feel like that group has progressively gotten better and better and better over the last few weeks. And they were playing good early in the year, but since the Oregon game, I feel like Ohio State's defense is really rounded into form. The secondary has been excellent. There's just no room for hardly anything in the passing game. I mean, yes, I understand that Northwestern threw for 200 yards or whatever it was, but a lot of those throws it wasn't the most efficient passing attack. They averaged 5 yards per attempt. So very, very entertaining performance if you like dominant defense from the Buckeyes. I think they're in a great spot. We've already spent too much time on that game. Texas at Arkansas, the number 3 ranked team in the country. This was interesting because Texas in the first half, it felt like Texas was going to be in full control. It felt like Texas was not overlooking Arkansas. I felt like Texas was going to go in there and they were going – I thought it was kind of a bad matchup for Arkansas. It turned out that Arkansas actually was able to do more with their defense than I anticipated. I thought Arkansas's defense, and in particular their secondary, would struggle in this game. I thought that group had several areas in which Texas could hit them. I thought Texas's yards after catch were going to be overwhelming. Well, it wasn't. Texas had just 315 total yards of offense. And if not for a couple of Arkansas turnovers, this game might have looked very different. This was not a game in which Steve Sarkisian is going to be showing offensive recruits, hey, here's what we can do. This was a game that required another level of discipline and toughness on the defensive side. And this was a game where it was on offense, don't screw it up. The defense is totally settled in. They're in a great spot. Don't screw it up offense. They didn't. Quinn Ewers and company having timely drives, timely conversions, and making sure that they didn't have any penalties hardly. I think they had 2 for 10 or 2 for 15. They never really got into a position in which it became a huge problem. 2 for 2 on fourth downs, Texas was. This, I thought, was not a great performance, but a performance that required maturity. And that's what Texas delivered yesterday in a 20-10 victory over Arkansas. Arkansas, that was their Super Bowl. That's their biggest game of the year. And Texas went in there, handled their business, got out without any issues whatsoever, and will be fine moving forward. Penn State rolls Purdue. Penn State's defense continues to play at a crazy high level. Their offense, it's nice to see where that group is seemingly going. Tyler Warren caught a touchdown down the left side on a vertical route. Drew Aller was 17 of 19. Very, very accurate performance from Drew Aller, but it's just amazing to me how good Tyler Warren is. If there's one takeaway in this game, it's like Tyler Warren's just untouchable. He's just a phenomenal football player. I don't care if you're running it with him or if you're throwing it deep, throwing it underneath, catch and run situations, the guy is just unstoppable. So that's the one takeaway there. Purdue, very human team, but they did what they needed to do. On to number 6, that's the BYU Cougars. They fall at the hands of the Kansas Jayhawks. We thought that this was coming. This was one of our upset picks of the weekend. Just had a feeling that BYU, after playing with fire for so many weeks, had a feeling like this thing was going to come back to earth, and it did in a big way on Saturday. Their offense, they just had a couple of really pivotal mistakes. 2 turnovers, a fumble, and an interception, but a couple of just very critical mistakes. They weren't good on third down. They were 3 for 10. They were able to move the ball a lot, but just didn't have enough to show for it. They outgained Kansas by more than 100 yards. But Kansas and Jalen Daniels had a couple of big plays in the game, a catch and run or two, a couple of moments in which you thought, all right, this thing could slip away. But BYU and this team was just too close. They were going to get burned at some point. They were playing too much to the level of the competition, and usually they're able to survive. But Kansas puts a touchdown in the end zone there in the fourth quarter, and that was ultimately the difference. I look at this BYU team, still have a ton of respect for them. Doesn't change my opinion on who they are or what they can be. But I do think that this was an opportunity to kind of reset. And they could still get to the college football playoff. They got to win the Big 12, but that always kind of went without saying. Them in Colorado, if they take care of business down the stretch, they'll be in a really good spot. But BYU is now going to be heading to Arizona State next week. So it does not get any easier because Arizona State, and we'll talk about them in a moment, they just knocked off Kansas State on the road in Manhattan, and Arizona State is probably one of the quietest 8-2s in the country. So BYU, this was not unexpected. This was not a surprise, but this now is putting your back against the wall because you run the risk in the event in which you lose on the road at an 8-2 Arizona State team next week, where you are not in control of your own destiny anymore. Moving on to the game of the weekend, that was the Georgia Bulldogs against the Tennessee Volunteers. Number 7, Tennessee, goes to Georgia, and it felt like Tennessee's defense, at least in the early going, was going to be in a really good position. And then, boom, Georgia found something in this game. And I think it started and set the tone early in the game with the first drive, first play. Carson Beck goes back and throws a deep ball. First play of the game. Now, it wasn't caught. It was dropped. I thought there was an opportunity. Should it have been caught? Should it not have been caught? I thought it should have been caught, but what do I know? I thought that kind of set the tone. Hey, Georgia was going to throw haymakers yesterday. They were going to throw shots downfield. They were going to be more aggressive. They were going to be more opportunistic. And man, I thought it was a really solid performance from the Georgia Bulldogs. Really solid. I don't think there is anything to be ashamed of whatsoever if you're Tennessee. You just got a desperate Georgia team that came out throwing big time blows. And got to give tons of credit to them for that. One thing I was really encouraged by in this game was the emergence of London Humphreys at wide receiver. If you look at Georgia, and look, the numbers are not going to blow you away. He had 3 for 63. And Georgia, I thought, did a really good job of spreading the ball around. I mean, they had a bunch of different guys in the passing attack getting involved. I thought Frazier played pretty well. No ball security issues. That was significant, and that's been a sign of improvement. But if you look at London Humphreys in the receiving game and all those wideouts, the wideouts honestly have been pretty average as far as creating consistent separation. They just haven't been great this whole year because they have a lot of guys that are really, really good and athletic with the ball in their hands, but they're not tacticians when it comes to separating and route running and setting up defenders and stemming routes and stuff like that. London Humphreys is a little bit more of your typical standard outside wide receiver. Whereas while Dominic Lovett, you get on the ball, let him see what he does with it. Arian Smith has tremendous top end speed, but maybe not the most polished and refined route runner. I do think that London Humphreys, his role in this offense should increase because he does some of the little things in the route concepts that Georgia has been missing. So it's nice to see him get involved. It was also nice to see the tight ends as involved as they were. Delp, Urosic, Lucky, all delivering combined between the three of them, 10 receptions. So I just thought it was a really good offensive performance from Georgia, and this was desperately needed. I thought all in all, the protection was solid too. I didn't think that there were a lot of situations where you're watching and you're thinking, yep, you know what, Carson is clearly being affected by the pass rush. And the week before against Ole Miss, it was pretty clear to me that the pass rush did have an effect on his quality of play. Great win for Georgia, still very much alive for the college football playoff. Tennessee, does this hurt them? Yeah, I think it does. But I also don't think that they're going to be too far outside the college football playoff picture. They've played a challenging schedule. They still have a good win against Alabama. But this one was disappointing, especially with how they played in the second half. This has been a second half football team for most of the year. They've been a slow starting unit all season long. Well, I'm not sure what happened in this game because it was the opposite. Fast starting, 10 points in the first quarter, and then they couldn't muster much in the second half. So there are things to figure out. There are things to try to address, but all in all, I thought it was really more about Georgia last night than it was about Tennessee. Notre Dame crushes Virginia. This was a good win. I think Virginia is one of the more challenging teams on Notre Dame's schedule. I know that's going to sound nuts. Virginia went into this game at 5-4, but I think that this Virginia team was kind of improving. They beat Pitt the week before. This Virginia team felt like they were trending in the right direction, and Notre Dame said, no, we're not messing around with you guys. 28 unanswered first half points and then cruise control in the second half, to the point with Anthony Calandria, Tony Muskett, these two quarterbacks for Virginia, they just couldn't manufacture a whole lot offensively. I'm very impressed with what I've seen from Notre Dame. I think Notre Dame is playing really high-level football right now. And I think their offense has really rounded into form under new offensive coordinator this year. And I'm very optimistic about how challenging this team might be to play in the playoff. I'm not saying Notre Dame's going to go and win the national championship. I don't know if I can go as far as to say that. And I know and I acknowledge that they have not played a high-level opponent in quite some time. I get that. But I just think their level of dominance is really encouraging. And there's still some meat on the bone. Notre Dame still got a game against Army. Notre Dame still has to go to USC. But I think Notre Dame is going to be a very difficult out in the playoff with what they're doing offensively right now. And hey, this is why you go and get Riley Leonard. This is why you go and fortify an offensive line and a young offensive line early in the year that has now gotten better and better and better. I just think they're in a really good spot. Boise handles their business. Ashton Jeanty goes for a $159 on 32 carries. Think about that. 32 carries for Ashton Jeanty. Couldn't eclipse the 200-yard mark, and it does feel like the Heisman conversation for Ashton Jeanty has died down just a little bit. I still think he's one of the most outstanding players in the country, and if I had to fill out a ballot, he would probably right now be on my ballot, but I don't know if he's going to have the numbers to support candidacy from most of the Heisman voter pool. I just think if he was flirting with 2,600 rushing yards, then I think that would have much more people's attention. To me, I just watch how he plays. I think he's one of the best, but I don't know if he's going to be in New York. We'll see. I hope he is. I really genuinely do. SMU, after what was, I thought, an interesting game, an interesting start to this game. They start out on fire, and they kind of mess around a little bit. BC climbs back into it. This game's tight. 31-28 there in the second half. Felt like things could be a little bit uncomfortable for SMU. Haven't seen them really in stress mode at any point in the last few weeks. I mean, they've been in complete cruise control. So it's kind of nice to see SMU tested, and it was also nice to see the response. Scoring that touchdown at the end to put it out of reach, very impressive. Arizona State goes on the road to Kansas State. This was one of the more surprising outcomes to me of the entire day. And it's one that'll probably get a little bit lost in the kind of in the fold, because Kansas State, look, they're a top 16 team. They now have 3 losses, but Arizona State and Kenny Dillingham, they have quietly put together one of the most impressive turnarounds in college football this year. And I don't feel like enough people have been talking about Arizona State, but we're going to start. Cam Scatabo, I think anyone that has watched him this year knows how valuable he is to his team, what he contributes in the run game, what he contributes as a pass catcher out of the backfield is phenomenal. To see him back healthy was significant. But to go on the road to Manhattan, first year in the Big 12, to race out to a 21-0 halftime lead and to just defensively completely stifle and frustrate this Kansas State offense. We know Arizona State's been pretty good this year. We know that they've been pretty good offensively, but the defense doesn't get talked about enough. And while the numbers at the end will look okay for Kansas State, forcing 3 turnovers, having 3 takeaways, that was the undoing. Couple interceptions thrown by Avery Johnson, who at this point in his career is still developing as a passer. He's tremendous athletically, but there is still work to be done in the passing attack. DJ Giddens, if you were to tell me he was going to average nearly 10 yards a carry, I would have told you, all right, Kansas State's going to go and win this football game, and they're going to win this game convincingly. They averaged over 6 yards per carry as a team. But ultimately, turnover's the ultimate neutralizer. And Arizona State's been creating a lot of them all year, and they did so again this weekend en route to an emphatic victory to get to 8 wins. Really impressive turnaround from Kenny Dillingham. Utah goes on the road to Colorado. This game never really felt overly competitive. 3 interceptions thrown by Isaac Wilson. That was kind of the end of the story right there, except Colorado had a few turnovers themselves. They had 3 turnovers themselves. So not the cleanest game if you were looking for a turnover-free affair. 7 total between the 2 teams. Shedeur Sanders was amazing. And obviously the buzz out of this one, everyone continues to talk about how good and how talented Travis Hunter is. And it's very hard to push back on that. Is he the most outstanding player in college football? I certainly wouldn't make an argument against it. I think he's a phenomenal player. And what he does with the ball in his hands is nothing short of remarkable. It ended up being like a 5-yard play, but he had to have run, 40 yards to gain 5. Really impressive there. He is just an electric player. So electric. He did have the defensive play that was kind of things bounce and they kind of bounce right into his hands. had the interception, and it was defended really over the top, and it gets deflected, but he was there. And he just always is seemingly around the football. So just another very impressive performance from him. I think that he'll be in New York at the very minimum, and it would not surprise me if the award were handed out today if he actually brought it home. New Mexico, one of the big upsets of the day. They knock off the previously 8-1 Washington State Cougars. Washington State had been playing great football, and they had really been playing good football. While maybe not as many people were paying attention as they probably needed to be, but my goodness, this was an entertaining game. 38-35, both teams going for nearly 550 yards of total offense. Mateer goes for 375 and 4 touchdowns through the air for Washington State. But Dampier, the quarterback from New Mexico, he stole the show. He rushed for nearly 200 yards. This guy is crazy athletic, unbelievable juice, and he accounts for about 375 himself in total offense between the passing game and the running game. So really impressive performance from New Mexico, and that essentially extinguishes any hope that Washington State has of making the college football playoff as an at-large team. Louisville, shocking game, also 38-35. Shocking to see Louisville go out there and lose to Stanford the way they lost to Stanford, to give up 17 points in the fourth quarter en route to the upset loss. Really surprising. This is not one that was on my radar whatsoever as far as upsets were concerned this weekend. I mean, I looked at Louisville, felt like, man, they're playing good football. They're getting more complete. Defense has been okay. Not elite, but still okay. To go and lose to a team that was previously 1-5 in the conference is really shocking. And if you looked at the game, it was sparsely attended. Stanford, though, very impressive to get the win. They've had some injury challenges this year, Stanford has, but when they're healthy, they've been competitive. I know that it might have been healthy 3 times, but they've been competitive. They've beaten Syracuse. They now have beaten Louisville. Like, they've thrown a couple punches there in the ACC and have made things pretty interesting. Clemson keeps their playoff hopes alive with a pretty exciting game. We were on the call for this one. It was one of the most exciting games of the day. And 2-minute operation, Cade Klubnik goes QB draw, takes it to the house, scores the game-winning touchdown. But Pitt, man, their defense was relentless. I mean, I don't know how many times Cade Klubnik or Nate Yarnell got hit in this game, but both defensive lines, so much fun to watch. Sacks, pressures, offensive lines that were struggling, injuries to the offensive line on both teams that have led to some mixing and matching and really underwhelming results along both lines of scrimmage. But Cade Klubnik makes the play of the day on the QB draw. It's a perfect call, perfect design, perfect result for the Clemson Tigers. He takes it 50-plus and takes it to the house. Clemson, prior to the run by Cade Klubnik, had rushed for about 5 yards. And then, boom, 150-yarder, and it changes the narrative for where Clemson was on the offensive side. Big win for Clemson. Really big win for Clemson. And that Pitt team, people will look at Pitt and say, well, they've lost 3 in a row. How good can they be? I think that's a really solid football team. I'm very, very encouraged by what I've seen from Pat Narduzzi's bunch. And with the backup quarterback yesterday, they really rallied around him. I thought he played really well. And their defense, unfortunately, they just got that one time. They gave up a couple big plays early in the game. They got that one time, but it wasn't enough. Credit to Clemson. That was a gutsy performance to go and get the win. South Carolina pulls out a big win against Missouri. South Carolina, new to the top 25 last week, wanted to stay in the top 25 against a top 25 team. I believe this was only the one of 2 ranked games this weekend. Georgia, Tennessee was the other. This was not one that was talked about as much as Georgia, Tennessee, but a really important game for South Carolina. Shane Beamer and company, they've now won 3 games in a row in November, which is pretty significant. They have been a team that has finished really strong in his tenure. There's no secret that they have had their challenges in September and October, but in November, things have really flipped the script. I think I looked this up a couple weeks ago. Shane Beamer was 6-16 against Power 5 competition in September and October. But now in the month of November, he is, I believe he's 10-4. So things have switched quite a bit for Shane Beamer. Really impressive. Great win. Gutsy win. Even when your defense did not have their best stuff. Gutsy performance, too, by Missouri to almost steal this one, to make it super interesting after doing very little in the first 3 quarters of the game, to go and put things together in the offensive end. The way they did, 2-point conversion, super interesting. Having a lead in this game, looking like you might be able to steal it. And Eli Drinkwitz had South Carolina's number. He had won, I believe, 5 in a row prior to losing this past weekend. But Rocket Sanders, touchdown, 15 seconds left. Just a tremendous and impressive performance. Gutsy performance from South Carolina. Not perfect, not flawless, but good enough to get the win. Very, very well done. Florida Gators, finally, the last game that we'll talk about, knock off the LSU Tigers. LSU has now lost 3 in a row. They have seen their record go from 6-1, looking really good, heading into that A&M game, solidified in the top 10, to now 6-4, and will find themselves outside of the top 25 when the College Football Playoff Committee rankings come out here in a couple days. Nussmeier, he took a beating, man. I mean, they were constantly harassing Garrett Nussmeier. I mean, hit after hit after hit after hit, and just couldn't get a whole lot going. DJ Lagway thought there was a lot of good moments, but there were also some moments where I thought he was a little off the mark. I wonder if that hamstring was bothering him just a little bit. Baugh and Jacoby Jackson, those 2 running backs. Baugh, outstanding, couple big runs in the game. I thought the receivers, Elijah Badger in particular, had a really solid game as well. But man, this was a really entertaining football game. The Dusty Dvorak and Dave Pasch did a great job of capturing the environment, capturing the energy. And the one thing I'd say about Florida is that while everybody seemingly has written them off, right? Everybody now has talked about how Florida and Billy Napier, and no one's really talking about them. Like they've kind of limped at times this year where they haven't looked very impressive. This team has been super competitive in several different games. Florida almost took down Tennessee. They've also given a bunch of teams fits. I wouldn't say that it was a close game against Georgia because the backup quarterback came in the game. If DJ Lagway doesn't get hurt, maybe that game's a little different. I don't know. But this team has been fighting to the very end. And now, because they have one game against Ole Miss at home and then a game against Florida State, will it be heavily favored? It's highly likely that Florida will find themselves in a bowl game, which is tremendous for Billy Napier and the staff, especially knowing some of the challenges that the season has presented with injuries to their quarterback and just up and down play. So a good bounce back performance from Florida after really playing terrible against Texas the week before, and the defense playing extremely well in this game as well. Constantly flustering a quarterback that had not been sacked very much this year. They get home like 6 or 7 times. So super impressive performance from Florida. They should feel great about it. And now, hey, guess what? They just ended LSU's hopes of achieving anything. There was only 11% chance that LSU could get to the SEC title, but it was a chance. That now is at 0. And guess who's coming to town next week? The Ole Miss Rebels. And that game will be noon. So it won't be, 3:30. Maybe the energy in the building won't be quite as high, but that's another big opportunity for Billy Napier and his staff. And I don't think anybody wants to play Florida down the stretch. They got some giant killer mentality going on right now there with the Gators. Really appreciate you guys being here with us. Thanks for dealing with the voice. Thanks for dealing with me. I really appreciate very much you guys and all the support that you've shown the show. If you could like, rate, subscribe, all that stuff. I promise I will be better tomorrow. I'm going to go watch some tape. I'm going to go take, like a medicine ball shot of something. I don't know. Something from, I don't know. It's gross. It tastes nasty. It's like pepper and lemon. But I'm going to take that because for whatever reason, that has always got me back on track. So we appreciate you guys. We love you guys. And we're back tomorrow here on Always College Football.
Hey guys, it's Greg McElroy. Thanks for watching Always College Football. Make sure you like, rate, and subscribe to ESPN's YouTube channel and wherever you listen to your podcasts.